understanding when you look at Korea that the pivotal moment is actually that meeting with Robert De Niro. It took him 4 years to convince you to open a restaurant in Miami. You eventually did, and that started a partnership that has lasted through the decade.
You know, I met him in 1988 after my husband. So he asked me to come to Western Europe. And I didn't know what he did.
You didn't know who was that?
No, I don't know what he did because I never watched him. You know, I was learning the business. Of course, after people, hey, no, it's really so working. But I understand.
How is he as a partner?
He's like, for me, in the real company, he understands to my concept. He support me 100%. But he also, he's a very smart people. Sometimes, so strange idea, it's good idea. So, for example, local hotels, idea come from him. This, so we have new restaurants coming in some of our hotel. For him, that would make no sense. We start over Las Vegas 11 years ago. Now it's a big success. So next to stay with the residents.
One of the biggest names in business for television?
That's a great question.
Very good question.
It's a great question. I so appreciate that question. If somebody else interesting questions,
Bloomberg Television, top experts, great questions. Bringing you up to the minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Lizzie Bowden outside Windsor Castle, England, and this is Bloomberg.
We are moments away from the start of trading on a very bullish day for risk assets. You can see futures up more than 1.5% on the NASDAQ, 2% gain, the small cap gaining 1.5% as well. We got kind of a stack attack here on the New York Stock Exchange. Might be an acquisition for ringing the bell, and down at the NASDAQ Central Bank Company, which is an old, very old company, I think 129 years old, but they also raised over $300 million in stock sale. Danny, we're watching.
Order filled.
Yeah, it's kind of like the only thing we're watching jobs too, but I mean, it's the stuff of it.
Order filled.
The overall market here, the open up 4.5% didn't disappoint. Sales of $65 billion in the January quarter, more than $500 billion in revenue.
Order filled.
Quarters, and that outlet growth made it clear that some of lots of
Order filled. Order filled.
At least for now, not.
Yeah, we're also
Order filled. Order filled.
Boosting its sales outlook for the year. It gains market share from all income groups. I was going to say it's not an AI company, but Walmart's push into e-commerce and AI.
Order filled.
Those pushes are
Order filled.
dreams. It did warn of higher costs.
Order filled.
About inflation.
Order filled.
I wouldn't say front and center, but still existence there at Walmart. And speaking of macro, let's turn back to this morning's jobs data. Job growth accelerated.
Order filled.
Signs of a stabilizing labor market before the government shutdown. Joining us to discuss, we are
Order
pleased to
filled.
say, is the U.S. Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez Durimer. Ms. Secretary, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let me first ask you about the headline number. It was a blowout. We were only expecting 51,000 in our survey, and far more than double that is what we got. How strong is this economy?
119,000 new jobs. I think that is a solid report for the American people and for the workforce. We have seen over and over again, that we want to have these gains, and it's those investments by this administration and this president, I think, is what you're seeing come online. So this was a solid report for these September numbers. We'll have to see how November numbers come out in December, but I think that this is good for the American people. We know that more people are wanting to work and they're actively seeking those jobs. And so it is my responsibility to make sure that we have that skilled workforce. And so I think that you're going to see consumer confidence. And again, with prices coming down, energy prices, gas prices, we're seeing, real wages go up. Blue collar wages have gone up over the last 60 years. And I think that that's the exciting part of this, is that we're seeing people who are wanting to get on the ground, have the skills that they need, and get in that workforce. Secretary Chavez Reamer, you might sound very similar to those who don't want this Fed to cut, that this is a healthy labor market. The president, though, even jokingly yesterday was saying Scott Bessent would be fired had he not been able to get this Fed to cut. So in your view of this labor market, is it strong enough that it doesn't need assistance from the Fed? Well, I think the president has been pretty clear on this issue. We did see the two rate cuts. I think the Fed does need to go ahead and cut again. You know, when I travel around the country talking to businesses, which I have hit 36 out of 50 states on my 50-state tour before, you know, the Democratic shutdown happened.
Order filled.
Business owners are wanting to borrow more money at a cheaper rate to invest in their workforce.
Order filled.
That is what they're asking. And so I think another rate cut is exactly what we need to really grow this workforce. I mean, we see GDP is up 4.2%. I think that that's positive growth. We want to see more private sector jobs come on.
Order filled.
119,000 jobs. We saw 97,000 of those jobs have
Order
been in the
filled.
private sector, which is way different than the Biden administration when we saw they were all government jobs. So I think we're on the right track.
It does seem like inflation is a concern. We heard that from Walmart today that it's got to pass through these tariff costs somehow. Are you not worried that we have a rise in inflation that hits lower income workers especially hard if we continue to cut rates?
I think what happens when you're talking to the American families every day, they want affordability. So they look for ways in order to provide for their families. As a former congresswoman and as a former mayor, I know how important that is each and every day. What we want to do is grow this workforce so they can have more money in their own pockets. These policies that came forward with the working family tax cut are going to start to hit. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. I think that that's what people want to see is more of their hard-earned dollars in their own pockets for their own choices. We've seen, again, these real wages go up almost $700, and I think that that's going to be key. Way different than the Biden administration, you know, when wages were down almost 3,000. And so, you know, to have $700 more in a family's pocket, that matters to the American people.
Don't we lose some of those dollars if we continue to see 3% plus inflation on top of the inflation that we saw during the Biden administration? Prices continue to climb for everything from food to housing. Isn't that a concern if we continue to cut rates that we throw more fuel on that inflation fire?
Well, actually, food prices have been down. Energy prices have been down. We've heard over and over again, our Thanksgiving meal is going to be less than it was under the Biden administration. So while we have seen oftentimes that, you know, some prices have gone up, whether it's in beef and some of the other sectors, we have seen housing. We certainly want to address the housing costs because people want to be able to afford their homes. I think that the Fed rate cutting will give us exactly that. So I'm standing behind the president on this. I think we need another rate cut. It's been a little bit secretary. Again, too long down that runway, but we need to cut that rate.
Part of what you're saying, you want to cut the rate because you want more private sector hiring. We hear you loud and clear on that, but we have to say this latest job support, government jobs grew. Do you want to see that reverse? Why is it growing when this is a government that's been trying to cut back on what you say was a Biden administration that only supported the economy through hiring via the government?
The government jobs haven't grown. The only portion of government jobs that has grown in this last report that is showing have been at the state and local level, not at the federal level. Over 2 million private sector jobs have come online, and that has been for native born. We are seeing massive amounts of the private sector. Out of these 119,000 jobs, 97,000 of those were in the private sector. We're going to do more and more with the private sector to grow this economy. What opposite than what the Biden administration did, where they were all federal jobs. That isn't what the mandate was when they elected President Trump. It was to grow the private sector economy. And that is exactly what's happening.
One of the other things the president is talking about is sending middle to lower income Americans rebate checks from the tariffs, which have been behind a lot of the inflation that we've seen. So giving some of that money back to those earning a little bit less. Do you support that, you know, $2,000 check push?
Well, certainly the president has been in consultation with his economic team. I think this is one way to give back to the American people. You know, people work hard for their money. And when they provide that to the government. They have a contract that's going to be spent wisely. These dollars, though, are coming in from tariffs to give back to the American people, and I think that that is a good plan that the president has set forward. He will continue in consultation with his economic team and what he determines. He's a man of the people. I say this. You see on my building, I hang his banner because he is the president of the working family. He is the president for the men and women of this country. Every decision I make at the Department of Labor is through the lens of the men and women who built this country, and they deserve to be taken care of, and that's exactly what the president has been doing.
Ms. Secretary, before we let you go, just quickly, I know we're looking for a little bit of guidance on some of the tax code changes, specifically who's going to be exempted from overtime tax or who's going to get that overtime tax exemption. Do you have any clarity on that, or at least a timeline of when we can expect the Labor Department to come out with those clarifications?
Well, I'll be working with Treasury Secretary and certainly through the Department of Labor. I would imagine that with those policies in place from the working family tax cut, that we'll start to see stuff in the first and second quarter. Specifics I don't have an actual release date. But again, 119,000 jobs, I think, is a solid report. I'll be looking forward to see what the numbers are for November, which will be released in mid-December. I know the economists all got it wrong on this. So this is a good for the American people that we saw a solid report of 119,000 jobs.
Ms. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That is the Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez-DeRemer.
Order filled.
Tomorrow, don't miss.
I don't like this shit, man.
Fed Governor Stephen Myron.
That's why I'm gonna just stay out and wait a little bit.
Wall Street time. So those jobs numbers helping
Just wait a little bit.
Street along with NVIDIA. Joining us now around the desk is Rayanne Mitrione, market strategist and founding partner at Cowen Family Office. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to be this morning. So certainly the
It's too choppy to just be in this.
is good. How do you look at it when the payroll figure
Order filled.
basis is really strong, but unemployment moves
Order
to
filled.
1.4%? Is this as positive
Order
for
filled.
risk assets as is being interpreted this morning?
Order filled.
It's certainly giving a little bit of mixed messaging, and we have to take into account that this is a little bit of dated data. So it's definitely a positive to see these numbers. I mean, and much higher than what was expected. Unemployment did tick up. It's good for the market to see that the economy is still strong, that the labor market may not be as weak as expected, but also the impact that that has on potential for future rate cuts. That may not be as positive for what the market is hoping for.
This could be, I mean, it can come either way, right? Good news can be bad news, or good news, as we know, right? Because we want the economy to grow, but we also want rate cuts in this market. One thing that cannot go either way is the AI CapEx story.
Order filled.
Continue fueling the growth that's priced in.
Oh my God, I'm so
Absolutely.
stupid, bro.
The market has been having some concerns.
That makes so stupid.
And expectations were really high for what NVIDIA was going to report yesterday, and they managed to really exceed on revenues, on earnings.
I'm like fighting this shit, bro.
It's everything that we wanted to see, we really saw. And we've seen that too with the other tech companies, with seeing Google, Meta.
Order filled. Order rejected.
Increasing their
I'm just gonna give a fuck.
It's going to be an aggregate of 380
Order
billion
filled.
this year,
Order rejected.
100 billion next year. So really, we've gotten that support that the demand is still there, that this AI story is still intact, and should continue to be a tailwind for the market.
If you were to change your mind and say, okay, I'm a little bit worried about this, maybe it's gotten frothy, how would you even actualize that view? If you do start to get worried, like if you bet against these companies, that hurts. If you stand on the sidelines, that also hurts. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. And you have seen a lot of that. There's still a lot of cash on the sidelines, and I think a lot of investors who have missed out on this thinking it run so much, and then it's continued to run. So you want to have that exposure. I mean, these companies make up such a big part of the index, and if you're not invested there, you really have been pretty far behind. But you do want to play both sides in a way. You want to hedge because, I mean, we saw that recent sell-off. So you want to have some value. You want to have some international. You want to have exposures in other asset classes as well.
Order filled.
Income alternatives. And having a little bit of cash for expenses is a good thing to have.
Order filled.
But just making sure diversification is part of your strategy.
We can add now to this AI bubble debate the private credit crack debate. Right? The saga has gotten pretty dramatic. Which private strategies, which alts are good right now to get into without doubling up on your AI bet? Because it turns out a lot of it really is a data center play.
Right, and
I don't even know.